Hello friends, it's Jim Freeman with the Puget Sound Seniors Club. And we're here today to talk about all things senior, but we're going to specialize in talking to a good friend. Her name is Christine Sevier, and she is a senior placement professional who lives in the Bay Area. And she has a really kind of a national experience. She's going to talk about a really important topic, which is when seniors are facing a need to move to a higher level of care. The first question that everybody has is, where do they go?
Yeah.
So Christine, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's a great pleasure. We don't often get to talk to people like you who are that have the breadth of professional experience and practical experience that you have. So I really want to dig into that. But first, why don't you talk about who you are and how you got here?
So Christine Sevier. So I was like most folks. I was living my life pretty independently, taking care of my kids. And then I had my grandfather asked me to come alongside him and be a co-conservator in this special needs conservatorship. What would you call it? Conservatorship, the process through the courts.
Right.
And at that time, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and they were managing just fine. And luckily, we all lived within the same community, so maybe we're about 5 blocks from each other. So I said, yeah, absolutely, no problem. I'm stopping by there once a week anyways, right? So I can check on things.
But this was new to you.
This was very new to me.
This is how you came to know.
I had zero experience being a caregiver or even managing the complex care needs of older adults. Zero experience. I came from the world of mental health and as an advocate, but mostly for like at-risk youth and helping them kind of get organized with education and school.
Right. So you had a family.
Mm-hmm.
You were married. And you had some children, and this event that took place in your life. Were you prepared for it?
I absolutely was nowhere near prepared. Luckily, my grandfather was a preparer, so he set up the legal and financial expectation for me and executed a really solid plan. Engineer, he's a planner. So I came alongside him as the special needs conservator for my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, and shortly thereafter, and I tell you, it was like as soon as the ink dried on that court document after we seen the judge, he was diagnosed with renal failure.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so here I was. I at that time, it made sense for me to just quit my job. I quit my job, stepped up to take care of my folks, my grandfolks, and taking him to dialysis 3 times a week, taking her to a dementia daycare program, and then shortly after, 1 year after, he passed, and he was the primary caregiver for her.
Right.
So.
Well, I find this common that, and it sounds like you had a family. You're taking care of your children. And you were working full time as an advocate or in this field.
Yep.
So you had a lot on your plate already.
Yes, I had a lot on my plate, and at that time my kids were in elementary school. So not only I'm doing the soccer thing and the dance thing, so days were long. I mean, I was burning at both ends for sure, mentally, emotionally.
Right. So this was enough of an event, something that occurred in your life that you weren't prepared for, you had no experience with. Is that what caused you to turn toward the problem and the opportunity of helping seniors find care?
Yeah. Well, in my area, it was hard, and I'm sure this is for most in-home care agencies. It's hard to staff on the evenings or the weekends. So literally for 2 years, my intention and my promise was to keep my grandmother home, right? Most people want to age in place until they know the cost. And the financial cost was at least $20,000 a month. I mean, in the Bay Area, you're paying $35 to $40 an hour for someone to come in and supervise.
So he was staying in his home and bringing people in to take care of him.
Yep. So she was staying in her home. I was bringing people in, and they would call off on the nights or weekend or forget a holiday. So I was there. I had to step in. And once the care needs became too great to where I was clearly not skilled to change an adult diaper, to give her a shower, and we had the walk-in tub I had the fancy one on
Yeah,
TV.
yeah.
I had all of the things. I really
Gold star.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like my grandfather prepared me. I had the single level house. We were right down the street. I mean, everything. And it was too difficult. So, like most families, I called the big internet company, right, for this fancy list. I didn't know I wasn't speaking with someone local. I was speaking with someone from Nebraska, right, who sent me a list. And it became clear, like, I have to place my grandmother somewhere.
This was to find a place for
Yeah,
your
I have to
parents,
find
yeah.
a place for grandmother.
Yeah.
This is beyond my level of expertise. This needs to happen. So I got the list, I went and looked, and some of these places were subpar. I mean, you'd do a Google search or check a Yelp review. No.
Yeah.
So
Well, and people don't have to call a number in Nebraska. They can just go online and they're going to find all kinds of stuff. But it's confusing.
Yes.
It's overwhelming. So how does a senior, particularly somebody who might be experiencing some cognitive dissonance, how do they process that?
Well, I think it's important to have a senior advisor on your side. I mean, I certainly wouldn't buy a house without a realtor, and I certainly wouldn't go into a relationship or a contract with an assisted living or a memory care community without having appropriate representation and an advisor by my side that will help me ask those right questions. Like, for my grandmother at this juncture, she was 100% bedridden, her food was pureed, so making sure that her activities of daily living and that she was clean and dry were imperative. I did not, all of the nurses in my family were like, make sure grandma doesn't develop bed sores, make sure, the place is changing her frequently, repositioning her, like that was so important in that juncture.
Right.
And where do you get that data? Where do you find that information?
Well, the best is from experience.
Yes.
And training.
Yes.
But I want to circle back on a term that you used, activities of daily living.
Yep.
Can you explain what those are?
So activities of daily living are your changing, dressing, feeding, anything that you need physical-wise.
All right. And so this is a term that's often used in the senior care business.
Yeah.
And what are they looking for? I understand there are different levels of ability to engage in activities of daily living. But so at what point does somebody need help? How many activities do they have to? How many boxes have to be checked before they are determined to need assistance?
Well, I mean, anything. I mean, you can go from being independent living and really just want a maintenance-free lifestyle, and you no longer want to have to manage the daily activities that are required
Mowing
to
the
manage a house,
lawn,
mowing the lawn,
cleaning the gutters.
Exactly, cleaning
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And oftentimes I see a lot of isolated seniors where the only person that they talk to every day is maybe the mailman.
Yeah.
And in those, I have right now a 96-year-old lady who all of her commute, never been married, no children. She lived in a cul-de-sac for about 54 years, and all of her neighbors had either transitioned or moved to senior communities. She was the only one left, so now it was all new working families, and she was afraid to death that she would fall while taking out the garbage can and nobody would find her.
Wow. Yeah.
So she said, you know what, I don't need any support. I need zero support with activities of daily living. She still drove. I mean, she was independent 100%. But she just was like, I don't think it's safe for me here anymore.
Right.
So she made the move, yeah.
Right. So you're in the business of helping seniors figure out which is the best place for them to go, which may not always be obvious.
Yeah.
So what do you look for as a professional, and what do you try to communicate to your seniors that's important to them?
Well, it comes down to a really solid assessment. So really I want to know what their non-negotiables are, what's important to them. What does a day in their life look like? If they're playing Mahjong every day, I want to find them a community that also plays Mahjong. I also want to know what their future care needs may look like. Did their parents have dementia or Alzheimer's? Because I would certainly hate to move you twice.
Yeah.
Let's make this decision soundly and get it done right the first time. Because in some communities, you may have independent and assisted living, but there is no memory care component.
Right.
So now you're getting a notice, you have to move.
Well, you mentioned before a little bit about contracts. So why don't you give us some kind of a description of the the breadth of options that there are for assisted living or for higher levels of care.
So independent living, maintenance-free lifestyle. You'll probably have a concierge at the desk, and maybe on another floor there is a nurse that can come help check in. And then you'll have assisted living, where there are a ton of caregivers there to help you with your activities of daily living, or maybe you just need help putting on those compression socks in the morning. There's a caregiver for that. And then there's locked memory care, where if you happen to be an elopement risk, that's probably a better suitable situation for you. And then they'll have
Elopement risk.
I know.
Yeah. Well,
An escapee.
Yeah, I've heard the term runners.
Yeah.
So okay. So
Yeah.
the people who are
Exit seeking.
prone
Yes.
to
Yeah.
leave the premises and go somewhere else.
Yeah, which, I don't know if you guys have this in Washington, but in California, we have silver alerts. So anytime there's a lost senior, you'll get a,
So it's like Amber Alerts?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
exactly like an Amber
Okay,
Alert.
silver,
You get
okay.
your buzz on your phone. So yeah, we have that in California. So then there's memory care units. And then what is really important, especially when you can no longer ambulate or advocate, I highly recommend the smaller residential care homes. There's 2 caregivers and only 6 residents in each of these licensed homes. They operate much like the assisted living communities, and I find that to be a higher quality of hands-on care. Larger communities are great, especially when...
Maybe for more active people.
Exactly,
Yeah,
for more
yeah.
active people, you're going to go to your happy hour, you're going to take a
Socialize,
bus,
yeah,
socialize.
yeah.
It's a cruise ship on land.
Yeah,
I love it. I'd
yeah.
move in today. Are you kidding me? It's great. Chef prepared meals, but once you can no longer manage any of your daily care needs, I really advocate for that smaller.
All right, so the number of people that are taking care of you is important, and that's called the ratio.
Ratios, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the state of California, you're allowed to staff a larger building according to care needs. What do you think that means?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
1 to 12? 1 to 18?
Okay.
I don't know. Nobody
So-
knows.
Yeah, so 2 to 6 is what you get in the small.
In the smaller care homes, it's 2 to 6. And I always tell families who are walking into this decision, not wanting to make this decision, and they see these fancy lobbies,
Right.
and I can tell
And
based on my
and
assessment.
people are playing cards.
Yeah,
and
people are playing
yeah,
cards, they're having
yeah.
a good time, and I can tell, you know what, mom needs a lot more care than this beautiful large community can provide. I always go in there and I will accompany them on these tours. So not only does my business provide them with a detailed list and a tour sheet, but I will come full concierge experience. And the first question I'm encouraging families to ask, especially when you have a high acute care needs and you need a lot of touches, what are the call pendant response times here?
The call what?
Call pendant response
Call
times.
pendant response times.
Yep,
Okay.
that is such an important data point that these families should be collecting,
Okay.
right?
All right. So we have small places.
Mm-hmm.
In our state, we call them adult family homes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have, intermediate size, and then we have great chandeliers, swimming pools, and
Yeah.
and there's different levels of cost.
Yes.
But are there also differences in things like capital facilities fees or community fees or refundable deposits or partially refundable deposits? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. So in the state of California, they're all under RCFE. They're titled Residential Care Facilities for the Elderly. They're managed by the Department of Social Services, and they're all month-to-month contracts. Now,
All of them?
all of them.
Okay.
All of them. Now, the CCRC model, the Continuing Care Retirement Community model, that is like a non-traditional, it's not even a real estate transaction, but it is a buy-in process. And I always tell families, ask for that entire admission agreement and read that 300-page document. Because if you move into a CCRC in the state of California and you decide you don't like it and it's not a good fit,
You may not get out.
you may not get out, or you're paying upwards into where I live in the East Bay, $60,000 to break that contract.
Wow. So how is a senior, particularly one who's maybe not been a lawyer, supposed to read those documents and understand them?
I mean, I would certainly get connected to a local senior living advisor, honestly. And I always tell families, like, most of the families 100% of the families that I deal with are primarily selling their family home to pay for care. I don't know, like in California, we've had CalPERS go out. I mean, Jen Worth was sending letters to people to saying, hey, you know, we'll cash you out of your long-term care insurance contract. And I'm like, no, don't keep it. But I will advise families, you know what, you're better off to invest that money on your own than to allow the CCRC to invest it.
Yes.
And then move into a month-to-month community that you can give a 30-day notice if it doesn't work out, and there's no harm, no foul. You're not going to get hit with the $60,000.
Well, this is a big theme in senior care and senior living in general. You want to maintain your options.
Yes.
And you want to maintain the ability of having, well, for your ability to choose what your options are.
Yes.
Right. So how do you advise people? What can you do to help people to maintain their options and their choices as they grow older?
So I always like to do a thorough assessment, and especially if it's a husband and wife. You know, there's a misnomer of like families think, okay, I move in here, I can stay here for the rest of my life, me and my wife. Well, if you have different health conditions and you are a couple trying to stay together, you really have to get connected with a local agent that knows, okay, Bob is independent, wife Sue needs some memory care. Well, what community is going to allow them to stay in the same apartment together and not have the wife banned to memory care, and maybe use a Wonder Guard? Maybe they have different modalities, that electronic devices that can be used so that couple can stay together.
Okay, well, it sounds like you have a lot of good experience in working with people, and that you're going to help them answer one big question, which is, if I don't live here anymore, where am I going to go?
Yeah.
That's the first question. But another big question is, how do I pay for it?
Yeah.
And what are my obligations in the future? Can you tell us the difference between private pay and, say, Medi-Cal or Medicaid payment?
So I will say in private pay, I always tell families I don't care how much money you have, you should go into this conservatively, because a lot of times you'll see communities, each community will have a different way that they will charge you, whether it's a level of care or a point system or what have you. Every community is very particular about how they structure their billing. And I hate to see families move into the Ritz-Carlton of senior living only to run out of money and have to end up in the Motel 6 of senior living. So go into this very conservatively. And in California, there are very few communities that accept the ALW, the Assisted Living Waiver program, that is a Medi-Cal benefit. So if you'd made just enough of the right financial decisions, and maybe your income is on a teacher's pension, maybe you have a teacher's pension.
Or maybe you have just Social Security.
Yep. Well, if just Social Security, you may qualify. Depending on what your Social Security limit is, if it's just Social Security, you may qualify for the Assisted Living Waiver. But right now in California, you're looking at a 2-year wait list. Or you will only have the options to go to a community that accepts that waiver, and that could be as far, 2-3 hours away.
So you might have to move.
You absolutely would have to move.
Yeah, or you might have to go back to daughter Judy's house.
Or daughter Judy's, yeah.
Right. So people, and by the way, you said month-to-month agreements. What does that mean for payment? Does that mean that they can adjust the payment at any time during next month?
Yep, so I see families move into, they're downsizing from a 3,000 square foot house, so they move into the huge 2-bedroom on the top floor of the independent living community, and as they notice that they spend less and less time in that huge 2-bedroom that is at a premium, they will downsize to either a 1-bedroom or sometimes even a studio, because you're living in the entire building.
The point I'd like to make, though, is that when you move into a community that has a month-to-month arrangement, they can raise that rent anytime.
Well, so we're seeing about a 3 to 6% increase in the base rate
Currently.
rent. Yeah. And I know that there are some legislations in some, like if it's in a independent living or assisted living community that has rent control, then they may fall under that rent control. So in terms of increase
when
percentages.
can a senior or their adult children expect these increases to come? Is it annually?
Yep.
Or okay.
Annually. On the move-in anniversary date is usually when I see that.
Okay. And what are the range of, I've heard them called community fees.
Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So community fees are usually that one-time deposit. You know, when you move into a rental, you usually will pay the first and last. I kind of prepare families for that. We're seeing about a $5,000 community fee, all the way up to $15,000. There are some very nice luxury assisted living communities that will charge a one-time community fee of like $15,000.
Right. We have some communities in our state, in Washington, that have like a $100,000 commitment, you know,
Wow.
up front. Yeah. Now, are those community fees refundable in any case?
So in the state of California, you have a 90-day period to get that back, and it's prorated.
Okay. What's the one thing that you would recommend if adult children or a senior are facing this kind of a problem? What's the first call they should make? Where should they talk? Who should
So
they talk to?
if an adult child is looking for independent assisted living or any type of communal care for their parents, they should absolutely connect with a local senior placement advisor in their area.
That's what they're called, local senior placement advisor.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So what do you have any? You know, we've just scratched the surface. We could go on for hours.
Yeah.
But what's the most important thing that you want to tell people today when they're facing this problem?
Get connected with the senior living advisor and make sure that each community can meet your loved one's future care needs.
All right. Well, Christine, thank you. Thank you very much. You're a good friend to come on the show and give the benefit of your knowledge and experience to our seniors club here in the Puget Sound area. And I hope you'll come back. Because
Absolutely.
we only scratched the surface here. We could spend many more episodes, I think, talking about some of these topics
Yes.
more deeply.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. So friends, if you have questions that maybe you're facing the same problem right now. Maybe you've got a senior parent, or maybe you as a senior are trying to figure out where to go next. Just give me a call, 360-865-0507. That's my personal cell phone. You can get a hold of me. No charge, no obligation. Or you can click on the link below in the description of this recording, and we'll get back to you within 24 hours. Hope to see you next time. Thank you all for being here. I'm glad you're members of the Puget Sound Seniors Club.